This is just to verify that I'm the correct speaker. You never know. Good. Yeah, thank you for joining. I was wondering how many people would be interested in an interactive session after lunch. Maybe if you had a good lunch, you feel like relaxing. So I'm going to start off with about 10 minutes of introducing the topic and setting the scene for some interaction between, clearly, two competing disciplines. And I'm quite excited about this because I've done similar workshops on the topic of how business and IT communicate with each other. And this is the first time I've done it with development and operations. So, and I'm going to do a write-up of the experience so we can share your thoughts with the broader community. And I plan to do these kind of workshops again in the future. So you're the first in a series of Dev and Ops Behaviour workshops. I represent this ASL, not-for-profit ASL BSL Foundation, where we've collected some best practices on the topics of application management. And on the business side, the responsibilities that business people have in their interactions with IT. And you could say that where application management is mostly about supplying IT services, supplying functionality to the business has a responsibility for demand, what do I need? And when they finally get the systems and services that you've delivered, do they use the systems well? In other words, do they get the value out of them? So that's our areas of interest, and we've got some publications, one of which is free. Our publisher has kindly given us a link to a free download of this this little pocket guide if you're interested. Talk to me afterwards if you don't have time to take a picture of the URL. The slides will be available. And my role as, sorry, do you want that? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. My role as an ambassador at this foundation is to spread the word, engage with other communities, and you can see from varying from enterprise architecture to IT service management, project management. And I have great fun doing that, and it's good to be here now for the third time at a Topconf event, and the fifth time in Tallinn in 2 years' time. It's a surprisingly popular destination for me. One of the approximately 20 countries that I've visited, sharing the word with people and learning from their experiences. A short introduction, about 10 minutes, then one, certainly maybe two exercises. The main exercise is the first one. I'd like to explore with you what kind of behavior you would like to see, if you're in dev, what kind of behavior would you like to see from those difficult ops guys? And if you're on the operations side, what kind of behavior would you like to see from those weirdos? And let's capture that. Depending on how much time we have after that discussion, and I'd like to do it organically, like to see how the discussion's going, maybe or maybe not, we'll get into the second little exercise, which is exploring what are the underlying factors that actually influence behavior. Because you can say, you know, I want those guys to do something else, but how can you influence them to actually do something else? Short wrap-up summarizing stuff. My charming assistant, Jan, who also works at the foundation, is going to be making notes when we come back to sharing the experience, and I'm going to do a write-up afterwards, which I'll share with the conference, so you can get it. This is more or less the story behind this session. If you want to change behavior, if you want to change results, you've got to change behavior. If you want to change behavior, you've got to find the drivers that actually change behavior. I think we're experiencing in organizations that we need much more collaboration between disciplines, multidisciplinary collaboration. You see it with Agile, you see it with DevOps. So it's certainly something that we have to focus on. I like to talk about the emergence of the T-shaped professional. I'm pretending to be a T-shaped professional now, who has in-depth knowledge in a particular domain, but also has understanding of other disciplines, because that enables you to communicate with QA or testing or whatever. Very important principle in communication is Stephen Covey, first seek to understand and then to be understood. So look at what the other side has to say. And then we're going into those two exercises. And if you think about what kind of things, factors influence behavior, there's a lot on the out of sight, on the bottom half of the iceberg, or probably the bottom 3/4 of the iceberg. You can play with incentives, you can give carrots and sticks, you can give people more money, you can say, I'm going to fire you if you don't behave properly. The question is, how much influence does that actually have on people's behavior? And it often boils down to the deep-rooted beliefs and values that people have. So we might get around to exploring that, but I thought I'd share that with you up front. As I mentioned, I've done several exercises on the collaboration with business IT. I have great fun with that. Just sharing this in the slide deck for future reference, should you be interested. I did this in 6 countries in the past 2 years, and I've made a summary of the kind of things that IT people say, if only the business would specify outcomes instead of the solution that they have in mind, then that would give us in IT the opportunity to think creatively about what is the best kind of solution. If only the business could set priorities and take decisions. Whereas on the other side, business people say they don't understand the context, the business context. These IT people, they talk in techno-babble. They don't talk in normal language. If only they would talk in terms of business benefits, costs and risks, that would make it for me as a business executive much more easy to take decisions. So stop talking all this techno-babble. And I thought a great overarching statement is, so you should really address this at an enterprise level, that the ideal enterprise should foster a culture in which business and IT share a joint vision, so obviously have talked to each other, a part of the same story, have an ongoing dialogue with each other, mature conversations, they aren't afraid to deliver bad news, we talk about it as adults, prepared to compromise, and wouldn't that be fun? Actually enjoy working together. So that's a great vision of where you could aim, what you could aim for. As I said, the business and IT is the area that I'm interested in. I often like to split it up into 4 disciplines. Demand, or specifying the kind of requirements, what do I need? Chucking it over the fence to development, who build solutions that are deployed in operations. Operations provides the system of services, and this is one of the most important and often one of the most neglected parts in the business, ensuring that the users actually use the systems and get the value out. Just think about your own organizations. How many users do you think, how effectively do they use the systems? Are they getting the value out of them that was originally intended? That is often not the case. But for today, I'd like to shift the emphasis to the collaboration between development and operations. You could think in terms of a cycle of activities that the ones on the left have more business emphasis and the ones on the right more IT. But starting off with identifying opportunities to use IT to improve your business, specifying what you want, developing, deploying, testing it, running it, supporting it. And on the user side, using the systems, applying the information, getting benefits out of them, and evaluating what needs to be improved. An interesting topic that I'd like to question you about is something I've been thinking about for quite a while. If we take these as the main activities that IT people are involved in, I'd like to compare Agile and DevOps. We had this little discussion beforehand. Would you say that in terms of the scope of activities that Agile and DevOps address and improve, would you say, one, that DevOps is part of the broader area that Agile addresses? Would you say it's the other way around? DevOps addresses most of the activities and Agile addresses some of those activities, so which has the broader scope? Third one is there's overlap, and we could talk about the degree of overlap. Agile has its own domain, DevOps has its own domain, and there's a common area of interest. Or are they completely separate domains in terms of the kind of activities? Take these as an example. The kind of activities that DevOps and Agile. What would you say? 2? 3? Seems to be either 2. I've got a 1 here. You're clearly the dissonant. It seems to be a fairly even mix between 2 and 3. So we've got these ones. I think we could talk about that later. But it's and I don't think there is an absolute truth on this, but it's an interesting topic to think about. When we talk about Agile, when we talk about DevOps, what do we actually mean? So I'm just going to leave that with you to think about. DevOps is very difficult to define. Gene Kim, one of the guys behind, one of the movers and shakers behind DevOps, came up with a pretty good definition, saying that DevOps is a set of cultural norms and technical practices. I think it's very good to make that distinction. Technical practices, things that you should do, and cultural norms, the values, the attitude you take when you execute things, that enable organizations to have 2 things, both a fast flow of work through development, through into production, while at the same time preserving a high quality, reliability, availability and security of IT systems. So balancing speed and quality of the operational systems. And a reference to the interview, very short interview with him. I couldn't resist sharing this before we start off in the exercise, the wonderful stereotypes that I think, look at the common denominator with how people think about sysadmins. They're great. Yes. And how, if you sort of take the diagonal here, how project managers think about themselves as world leaders, how QA thinks about itself, the designers, developers, really great. And sysadmin. So feel free to take an extreme polarizing position when you think about these guys. So this is we've already split ourselves into dev and into ops. As far as numbers, what I'd like to do is to split you up into, I think, probably 2 halves, 2 groups that can discuss. So maybe if we have 4 or 5 people, if you would form a little group for about 10 minutes to talk to each other about the kind of behavior that you would like to see from operations. And similarly here, I think, right, that's it. Well, that's decided. You're with that lot. You're a group. And the same exercise, how would it make life much easier for you to deliver good stuff to the enterprise if only these developers would behave in a better kind of way? So what I'm looking for is the output of the session. After about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we'll just see how the discussion goes. I'd like to hear from each of the 4 groups a summary of the major points, the major findings, the major kinds of desired behavior that you would like to see from your counterparts to enable much more effective collaboration. Then we'll record those findings, and I'll do a little write-up afterwards. Okay? And I realize it's after lunch. I realize we're in Estonia, so yeah, great. good idea. Thank you. Yeah, excellent. And how would that translate in terms of concrete behaviour? What could you observe when they're being more rude? You know, what would you see?
Well, in this particular case, I mean, if there are procedures that have been tested already in development environments and they work fully automated, they work, then operations guys should.
I'm going to start. This is going to be way too short. Yeah. But in a couple of minutes' time, I'd like to start sharing the results. A couple more minutes, and then just see where we are. I'd like to. I'm so sorry that we don't have more time, but I'm really keen on sharing the results that you've managed to think about. So let's move on to sharing the results of the discussions. Now, who should we? Let's start with development. How should these operations guys behave more differently in order to improve the collaboration? Who's going to be the spokesman and woman?
Yeah, I can do that. So yeah, we just
wrote down 4. Yeah, maybe. But have we got a mic?
No mic.
Cameraman, do we have a mic? Where?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, you're a technical guy. That was a technical answer. No, okay. Well, we'll do it without. Okay, thanks. Well, if we're recording it, go ahead. Go ahead.
Who has the loudest voice there? Okay, I'll try to be loud.
So we actually wrote down 4 points. One thing that we want ops to be more proactive and responsive in terms of delivering infrastructure and environments, because that's usually a problem in most environments. In most environments, that's a problem that we're waiting for servers, waiting for configurations, waiting for something. So we want ops to be more responsive and proactive in that sense. And speaking of that, usually it's kind of visible what kind of demand is coming into operations department, and we would like ops to do a bit of capacity planning. So if suddenly they run out of capacity, it's not a surprise. It's something that should be planned for. Also, another point, we would like ops to be more adaptive, and in that sense, we also, as devs, would like to be more adaptive as well. So if there are some procedures that have been tested already in dev environments and test environments, then the same procedures should be applied to production, or at least ops should give feedback about how these procedures should be adjusted to also work in production and stuff like that. And another thing, the last thing in our list, is that we would like also operations guys to be involved more in testing and to provide feedback about how things should be operated and all that stuff. Okay.
I could only add is we would be happier to see if you guys could be a little bit more result-oriented rather than service-oriented.
So what kind of behaviour would that be? What kind of behaviour would you like to see?
We typically, when we do development, we use Scrum. When we want when we so dying to see this feature running somewhere in production and working actually, so we would be happy to see the same behavior from.
Thank you for that. I think it's time for a response from the other side.
So I'm okay. I'm talking what now the operation wants. Just to respond to you, do you know that there are as many steps from development to operation as from operations to development? And if you are in different floors, it's just that you have the same steps, but once you are going upwards and second going down. So this is, but going same distance, yes. But going for real is I would maybe start with transparency from requirements to the release notes, feedback, and architecture. What I mean by that is actually we would like to understand how the business requirements are implemented in the system, so we know how the system is really working, and it should be some kind of a architectural picture, or when we are talking about this microservice platforms, then the integration as well. So knowing how the data flow goes from one system to another. And then the second point that we also today talked is the logging and so forth. So transparency in how it's created. And then jointly we can do also the business monitoring. So the second one may be the processes and pipelines. It means that the one important thing for us as well is the technical depth. And we would like also that the development takes us also to the business and talk together what are in the pipeline. So if we are there together, we can present also the technical depth. So what we have not done and what we, for example, need to decommission in some time. And if we are doing together, then we can settle, for example, that yes, we will do these business requirements first, but the next release, for example, we reduce the technical depth. And all it all together, actually, it comes to the quality. And me, as being part of the both development operations, my mentor has said that that the development operations need to be one IT to the business. So, and after that, we will have the quality. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Well, what about that? That's appreciation for these. Finally, operations gets appreciated by developers. So, who's going to, yeah? Oh, you got the notes.
Yeah, so what we got down, pretty much the same thing, having the faster support, near real-time support from operations about getting things done. And we came to the idea that I think there is a difference in priorities for the stuff that operations need to do themselves, their own task list, and the stuff that development is requesting from them. So it needs to be more critical, prioritizing what's in the operations task list and what's coming in from outside. The operations should have really high system usage understanding, and this is the same thing that you mentioned, that you need to know the architecture and the how the system behaves. But we think that this should go even further, and understanding how users are actually communicating with the system. So, and one of the final points we had is operations should be more about helping developers or collaborating with developers, and not so much about providing operations as a service. So this again could lead to the cross-functional teams. So the change that has happened with testers and developers, that the walls have been broken down, is currently happening with the operations as well. And this is due to the fact that testers don't anymore provide service, testing as a service, but they coach developers and assist, create tools and data sets for the developers to help them test better.
No applause for these guys.
Yeah, we can actually only add. I mean, we are basically the first point that you have to close. we would +1 that, so to speak. And I think we came up with two more or less big areas, which is one, that we want the dev work to be more transparent, and that the communication of that transparency is tighter between dev and ops, and so that we don't, as ops, we don't necessarily need to understand the internals of a system, but we certainly need to understand the data flows and how it affects our operations in that sense. And yeah, this via a tight communication that really says that okay, here you can expect load, here this data is priority 1, this data is priority 2, and such. And then for the practice, actually, that goes along with this homogenization of terminology in particular, but also of the practices, meaning that it's already difficult to understand the language, the lingo in one group. Now, as soon as you add another department, the lingo is different. And I would even break this up here, not between dev and ops, but that includes the whole company, is that the first thing you should do, you should sit to, when there's a new requirement cycle coming up, you need to define, okay, what does that mean to you? What are the words meaning, literally? Like, what is a system? What is a user? These kind of things. So this kind of idea of the domain-driven development. And of course, in that should also help clearing up, like being specific for requirements. And I think dev wants to hear that from business. The business should be as specific as possible about the requirements, but also ops needs to know from dev, what actually do you need exactly under, what are the parameters of the system you see your code running in. I guess that's basically it, yeah.
Good. I think this has gotten wrong somehow. Yeah, I hope you got that on film. Oh, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, great. Right. Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes left. We don't really have time to discuss in separate groups the drivers behind behavior. But if you just think about the kind of behaviors that you've expressed that you'd like to see in order to improve collaboration, you take a look at the kind of things that drive behaviors. What do you think? Let's spend a couple of minutes trying to identify the main kind of things that have to change in order to, for instance, get one party to explain better. You know, one of the points was if only if developers would give better insight into how the system is constructed, so we have a better idea of what's going on. Now, what would you need to change in terms of drivers in order to get them to adopt this new behavior? Is it just a question of giving them money, or information, or telling them, giving them more information about the context? We can't do our work because we don't understand. Oh, we didn't realize that. Would that be enough to change their behavior? Just think about it in those kind of terms.
I think it's about thought pattern. Keeping something back of your head all the time. Should operations know about that? I did something. Should operations know about that? Should this behavior be logged? Yes, no. On which level?
I heard the word transparency mentioned several times, on both sides.
Mm.
I think it is physical conditions. I mean, I'm not completely sure if I understand this right, but we used to have dev and ops in different groups. We changed that because of that. Meaning we put them in one group, not in one group.
Yeah.
So that actually fundamentally changed things. That we're now in one physical location.
At a previous conference, somebody brought up the same term about physical co-location. Somebody else said, and that refers back to the point about mental models, about thought patterns. not only physical co-location, but mental co-location, which I thought was a great way of thinking about it. So you're located in the same mental space. You have the same kind of concepts and notions that you think about. Yeah, so it would really help. Changing the physical environment would really help.
I don't want to at all not say that it's a negative or positive, because it can be certainly negative. I'm not saying that, but saying if you put the teams closer together, following Conway's law, your application might as well get messed up because it might grow stronger together.
Yeah.
So but it does certainly change behavior.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's a good thing.
this information flow which frameworks works as a set of rules, documents, and shares. Yeah, what the channels currently goes through
Face to face and
face to face.
Yeah.
It can be better, but sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's an observation. I'd like to stop. Well, I don't want to stop the session, but we're going to stop the session now. But that's an observation, I think, which we've seen in previous talks, that there isn't a perfect solution. Everything comes with a downside, and it's a case of balancing, making a compromise, and realizing that this is not the end of history today. It's not as if we've reached a final point where we've got the perfect system, perfect organization. Things are going to change. But this is an opportunity, and I hope you've got something out of it. Giving you the opportunity to think about what kind of behavior would be effective and productive on both sides. I'll do a little write-up. If you happen to see the write-up and have some comments on it, I'll make it open for discussion. Please feel free to contribute to that. And I hope this will be the first in a series of very, very fruitful workshops. So thank you very much for participating. Thank you. Thank you.